So today, I wanted to talk a little bit about subsidies. I made a short about it, see, but I wanted to touch a little deeper on subsidies because you can only fill up so much in 60 seconds. See, being an Iowa born native, right? Here in Iowa, we receive a lot of agricultural subsidies for farmers. There's a reason behind that. And the reason was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s, subsidies by the Iowa government were meant to reduce the cost and offset any price issues with local farmers. And that was 92% of all subsidies. And that was great because it did reduce the cost of produce. See, there's some comparative analysis out there from the 80s and 90s. And I remember going on with my mom to buy bacon. Bacon is so delicious. And in 89, a pack of bacon was 89 cents. A little less than $1. That's a whole slab of bacon. And in the 90s, it had gone up to almost $2.50. Now, if we look at today, nearly 30 years later, what is the cost of bacon? In the state of Iowa, it's still $5 or $6 for a slab of bacon, depending on where you go. If you go to Hy-Vee Grocery, it tends to be a little more expensive. You go to Aldi's, it's a little cheaper. But see, the problem is that these agricultural subsidies were meant for small business, not big business. And here in Iowa, a lot of our farmland has been bought up by big business who receive these subsidies. Now, they charge the same price, generally speaking, and have a lower operating cost than a single family because they have much more efficient feedlots. And they don't have to graze a lot of their animals. They can just import the feed the animals, and then take them off to slaughter. And one of the big issues here in Iowa has been pig farming. See, 84% of all pig farms in Iowa are corporately owned, are not incorporated, which means multiple farmers have come together to incorporate and have a co-op. They're big business from out of state. And they still receive these agricultural subsidies. But they still charge the same price and are being paid the same price as the little farmer. Now, I don't understand how that might be fair, because it's not reducing the cost of our produce. In fact, the cost of Iowa produce has increased under the leadership that we currently have here. And the reality of the situation is we will all suffer the consequences if the breadbasket of the United States, not just Iowa, but Nebraska and the surrounding states, if agricultural subsidies continue to go to big corporations. See, in the late 90s, many large corporations came in and bought out a lot of these small Iowa farmers who were no longer receiving subsidies from the government and went tits up, went underwater. And a lot of the reason why they went underwater is because they could not compete with large agricultural companies that were coming in and reducing the cost of pigs, corn, soybean, cows, and chickens, and eggs. The reason why they were able to reduce the cost of these, and when I say reduce the cost, I'm not talking to the consumer. I'm talking the cost to produce these things. See, the larger your farm is, the cheaper you're able to sell your product for. Now, if you're a corporation, right, and you have 1,000 acres of soybean or corn, you're able to sell that at a much cheaper price because you have more of it, and it costs you less to produce it. The reason why it costs you less to produce it is because you have large backing. Now, that isn't the whole story as to why it's cheaper for you to produce it. The real reason why it's cheaper for you to produce it is because you're still receiving agricultural subsidies. The same subsidies that the family farmer would have made. And on top of that, because you are big business receiving these agricultural subsidies, the cost of your produce is cheaper because you don't have to foot the whole of the bill for the production of that produce. And even beyond there, because you're a large agricultural producer, you're able to basically set the price for the products you sell, thus hedging out any smaller businesses, smaller family farms, from the market. One good example of this would be Tyson, which I touched on in a short. Tyson Meats, which used to be BPI here in, or IBP here in Iowa, right, is squeezing the little man. The cost of a hog has gone down by 30% in the last 20 years. Now, for small business, for small farmers, that screws you over without any agricultural subsidies. And a lot of these small family farms are no longer receiving subsidies. You can thank Kim Reynolds and the previous governor for that. See, they're not about enriching those that are in the middle class. They're about enriching their corporate benefactors, the people who got them elected. And the reality of the situation is it's never going to get any better so long as we continue to allow politicians use their political speak to indemnify big business, because they're the ones that contribute to their campaign. And one major problem with all of this is that affects mine and your pocketbook. Is that worth it? To see the little farmer run off so big business can come in and take his land? See, a lot of these Iowa farms were owned generationally. I know one of the oldest farms here in Iowa was owned generationally for about 130 years. That farm closed right around the time that IBP got turned into Tyson. And the reason why that farm closed was because agricultural subsidies in the area were given to big business instead, who said that they could come in and farm a better product, increase revenue for the state, and at a cheaper cost than this family-owned farm. Now, I don't know about you, but it doesn't look like prices are dropping, even though we're giving our hard-earned money to these big corporations who are supposed to be reducing the price for those agricultural subsidies. It's the same bullshit they gave us over ethanol. That, oh, if we get ethanol into gas, oh, it'll reduce the price of gas. And yet, a gallon of ethanol blended 10% gasoline is what? 50 cents cheaper than regular unleaded with no ethanol? And yet, scientific evidence has come out showing that ethanol blended gas is not good for your engine. Don't know what to tell you. And yet, we're funding these agricultural subsidies that produce ethanol for these large plants that produce ethanol to reduce the cost of gas while the cost of food goes up. I would rather pay an extra 50 cents in gas so that I could go out and buy some beef roast that isn't going to cost me $15. How do you feel about it? Why don't you get back with me and we can talk about it? God bless. And have a good rest of your day, even though this isn't something that'll make you happy.